My mother rolled her eyes when I walked into the courtroom, like I was still the child she had ignored for 35 years. She leaned toward my father and whispered, "This should be quick." Then the judge looked up, saw my name, and stopped mid-sentence. "Wait," he said, staring at me. "These allegations are against you." My parents turned so fast their chairs scraped the floor. They thought I was just the quiet granddaughter who inherited $4 million. They had no idea what I did for a living or why the judge suddenly asked to see the full recording they had tried to bury. The key to my grandparents' house was brass, heavy, and worn smooth around the edges. Grandpa Charles gave it to me when I was 12. "You never need permission to come home," he said. For years, that key hung beside the kitchen door, tapping softly against the wall whenever the heat kicked on. The house always smelled like coffee, furniture polish, and whatever Grandma Rose had in the oven, cinnamon rolls on Sundays, pot roast when it rained, apple pie whenever she sensed I was pretending not to be hurt. My parents had dropped me there when I was 8 months old. "Just until we get settled," my mother, Susan, told them. A few weeks became a year, then several. By elementary school, I understood that promises from my parents had expiration dates. Mom would swear she was coming to my school play, then call after the curtain closed with some excuse about traffic. Dad, Brian, missed birthdays but somehow always remembered Grandpa's number when one of his businesses needed money. At 8, I stood backstage in a cardboard moon costume, watching the auditorium doors between every line. Grandpa and Grandma sat in the front row. The chair beside them stayed empty. That chair followed me through childhood. Soccer games, debate tournaments, graduation. Sometimes Mom arrived later with an expensive gift and perfume strong enough to fill the hallway. She would take a picture with me, smile like we were close, then leave before dinner. Grandma never criticized her. She would just cut another slice of pie and say, "You don't have to earn your place at this table." Grandpa taught me differently. In the workshop behind the house, he showed me how to measure twice, check every joint, and never trust something just because it looked solid from across the room. That habit became my career. By 36, I investigated financial fraud for a living. I spent my days tracing payments, comparing records, and finding the exact moment a story stopped matching the facts. My parents knew almost none of that. Mom called it office paperwork. She never asked another question. After Grandma died, Grandpa and I kept our Sunday breakfast tradition at a small diner near his neighborhood. He always ordered black coffee and toast. I always stole one of his fries. One Sunday, his phone lit up with Mom's name. He stared at it until the screen went dark. Then he slid the brass key across the table toward me. "Keep this close," he said, at the time. I thought he meant the house. I didn't understand he was preparing me to defend everything inside it. The envelope sat beside my coffee for 11 minutes before I opened it, plain white. My name typed across the front, no return address, I recognized. By the time I reached the second page, the coffee had gone cold. My parents were suing me. According to the legal notice, I had isolated Grandpa Charles, controlled his appointments, interfered with his finances, and pressured him into changing his will. They wanted the court to invalidate everything he had signed and divide the estate between them. I read the accusations twice, not because they were complicated, because they sounded like someone had taken every loving thing I had done for him and dragged it through mud. 4 weeks earlier, we had gathered in a quiet conference room for the reading of Grandpa's will. The air conditioner hummed above us. A framed photograph of him sat near the end of the table, wearing the same patient expression he used whenever someone disappointed him. Laura Mitchell, his attorney. Read the terms calmly. The house went to me. So did his savings and investments. Together, the estate was worth about $4 million. He left a smaller amount to Maria, the woman who helped care for him, and another gift to a local community fund. Mom didn't ask about the fund. She didn't ask whether Grandpa had left a letter. She gripped the handle of her purse and said, "What did he leave us?" Laura's voice stayed level. "Mr. Bennett considered the financial support he provided during his lifetime to be your share." Dad leaned forward. "What's the house worth? Not who would maintain the garden, not whether I planned to keep Grandpa's workshop intact. Just the number. Mom turned toward me slowly. You knew. I didn't. Don't lie to me. I'm not. She stared at my face like she could force guilt to appear if she waited long enough. 2 weeks later, her lawyer called Daniel Foster, the attorney I had hired to review the estate. My parents would drop the lawsuit if I paid them $1 million. In exchange, they would stop telling relatives and family friends that I had manipulated Grandpa. Daniel repeated the offer to me in his office. I looked through the window at rain sliding down the glass. They're asking me to buy my own reputation back. That's one way to describe it. And if I refuse, they proceed. I refused. That was when the legal notice arrived. Attached to their claim was a short recording of Grandpa's voice. Taylor handles everything now, he said. I don't want Susan involved. The clip ended there. 12 seconds. No question before it. No sentence after it. Just enough to make care sound like control. My hand tightened around the paper. Then I remembered the workshop. Measure twice. Check every joint. Never trust something because it looks solid from across the room. I placed Grandpa's brass key on top of the legal notice. The words "undue influence" disappeared beneath it. For the first time, I stopped asking why my parents were doing this. I started asking what they had cut out. I covered Grandpa's kitchen counter with 2 timelines. On the left, I placed everything my parents claimed. I controlled his appointments. I kept Susan away. I pressured him to change his will. I took over his money. On the right, I placed what the records showed. Daniel stood across from me with his jacket off and sleeves rolled up. The kitchen smelled like stale coffee and lemon cleaner. Grandpa's brass key rested between the stacks. Do not touch anything yourself, he said. No calls to banks, no favors from people you work with. We do this clean. I know. Good. They are counting on you getting angry. I looked at the 12-second recording again. They are also counting on no one asking for the rest. Daniel requested the original recording. Grandpa's medical evaluations, Laura's notes, payments, messages, visit records, and every version of his estate plan. Then the timeline started filling itself in. Grandpa had met with Laura 6 times over 18 months. I was not present for a single meeting. 2 doctors had evaluated his memory and decision-making. Both found him capable. He still reviewed his own statements, paid household bills, and approved every major expense. Maria, the woman who helped him with groceries and appointments, agreed to speak with Daniel. Taylor never kept anyone away. She told him. She kept asking Susan to come. Maria remembered the week Grandpa had surgery. I offered to pay for Mom's travel and clear out the guest room. Mom said she already had plans. The payments were worse. Over 25 years, Grandpa had given my parents close to $1 million. Mortgage help, business debts, medical bills, emergency transfers that somehow became routine. Every large payment was followed by the same pattern. Mom promised a visit, then canceled. Dad started another business, then called Grandpa when it failed. The old estate plan did include Mom. Laura explained that Grandpa changed it only after years of support, repeated absences, and one final request from Dad to use the house as collateral. Then Daniel found the settlement message, $1 million, and they would withdraw the case. Not an apology, not family counseling, not one request for something sentimental from the house. A number. The original recording arrived 3 days later. I pressed play at the same counter where Grandpa used to sort his mail. His voice filled the room. Taylor handles everything now. Appointments, groceries, repairs. I asked her to. I don't want Susan involved because every conversation turns into another request for Brian. Then came the part they removed. Taylor has never asked me for a dime, if anything. She keeps telling me to spend more on myself. 37 missing seconds. That was all it took to turn devotion into manipulation. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. You can still fix this before everyone learns what you did. I showed it to Daniel. He saved it with the others. From that moment on, every call went through him. Every message became part of the record. I stopped explaining. I stopped defending myself in private conversations no one else could hear. I slid the brass key across the counter and placed it beside the full transcript. Use all of it, I said. Daniel nodded. For the first time, the house did not feel like something they were trying to take. It felt like a witness. The clerk called the case, and chair legs scraped across the courtroom floor. Mom turned when I walked in. Her eyes moved over my navy suit, the file in Daniel's hand, and the brass key curled inside my palm. Then she rolled her eyes, not subtly. The same look she used when I was a child and asked why she had missed another birthday. She leaned toward Dad and whispered, "She always loved making a scene." Judge Henry Collins entered, opened the case file, and began reading. Then he looked up. His gaze stopped on me. "Wait," he said. "These allegations are against you." Dad's head snapped in my direction. Mom's smile tightened. The judge removed his glasses. "I recognize Ms. Morgan from prior proceedings involving financial exploitation of elderly victims." Mom stared at me. For years. She had described my work as office paperwork. Judge Collins continued before anyone could speak. "My familiarity with her professional testimony is not evidence. This case will be decided solely on what is presented here." "Does either party request reassignment?" Michael Turner glanced at my parents. Mom shook her head. "No, Your Honor." Daniel leaned toward me. "They still think confidence is evidence." Mom testified first. She said Grandpa became lonely after Grandma died. She claimed I slowly took over his schedule, his bills, and his relationships. "I tried to visit," she said, pressing a tissue beneath one eye. "Taylor always had a reason it wasn't a good time." Daniel approached her with a stack of messages. "Mrs. Morgan, did Taylor invite you to stay at Charles's house after his surgery?" "I don't remember." He read her reply aloud. "Can't come. We already booked the lake house." Mom's fingers tightened around the tissue. Daniel showed another message, then another. "Thanksgiving, Grandpa's birthday, a medical appointment Mom promised to attend, then canceled hours before." "Were you prevented from visiting?" Daniel asked. "Or did you repeatedly decide not to come?" Michael objected. The judge allowed the question. Mom looked down. "I had a life. So did Taylor," Daniel said. "She came anyway." Laura Mitchell testified next. She explained that Grandpa met with her 6 times over 18 months, alone. He reviewed every section of the will. He completed independent medical evaluations. He explained exactly why he was changing the earlier plan. "Did Taylor attend any meeting Daniel asked?" "No." "Did Charles appear confused?" "Never." "Did he mention punishing his daughter?" Laura shook her head. "He said he had already provided for Susan during his lifetime. Then came the payments. Nearly $1 million over 25 years. Mortgage help, business debts, medical bills, repeated emergency requests." Dad shifted in his seat as each amount appeared on the screen. Mom had testified Grandpa abandoned her financially. The records showed the opposite, but Michael still had the recording. He played the 12-second clip. "Taylor handles everything now." "I don't want Susan involved." Mom looked toward the judge as if the case had just ended. Daniel stood. "Your Honor, we requested that the complete recording be played." Michael's confidence slipped. "The relevant portion has already the complete recording," Judge Collins said. Daniel pressed play. Grandpa's voice filled the courtroom. "Taylor handles everything now. Appointments, groceries, repairs. I asked her to. I don't want Susan involved because every conversation turns into another request for Brian." Mom stopped moving. Then the missing 37 seconds played. "Taylor has never asked me for a dime. If anything, she keeps telling me to spend more on myself. Susan is not being kept away. Susan chooses not to come." The air conditioner hummed through the pause that followed. Daniel looked at Mom. "You submitted a version that removed the reason Charles did not want you involved." "I didn't edit it," she said quickly. "Your attorney received it from you." Her eyes moved toward Michael. His face had gone pale. Daniel could have stopped there. He did not. Laura produced one final video Grandpa had recorded when he signed the will. He sat in his study. Thinner than I remembered, but alert. "I am leaving the main estate to Taylor because she has been my family in action, not merely in name," he said. Mom began shaking her head. Grandpa continued, "I am not punishing Susan. I am refusing to reward absence again." Then he looked straight into the camera. "Taylor did not take my daughter away from me. My daughter kept choosing somewhere else." Mom stood abruptly. "That is not fair." Judge Collins's voice cut through hers. "Sit down." "Mrs. Morgan." She did. Only after the will and the accusation had been addressed did Daniel reveal the motive. Dad's businesses were buried in debt if my parents won. They planned to sell Grandpa's house immediately. The $1 million settlement demand matched almost exactly what Dad needed. This had never been about preserving Grandpa's legacy. It was about converting his home into an escape route. Judge Collins returned after a brief recess. He found Grandpa fully competent. He found no undue influence. He upheld the will. My parents' petition was denied, and they were ordered to cover the additional legal costs caused by the misleading recording. Mom had entered the courtroom rolling her eyes. When I passed her on the way out, she could not lift hers from the table. I opened my hand. The brass key rested against my skin. This time, it had left no mark. The key turned once, and the front door opened into a house that still smelled faintly of cedar, coffee, and Grandpa's old aftershave. Nothing had changed. His coat still hung by the stairs. Grandma Rose's blue bowl still sat on the kitchen counter. The clock above the stove ticked with the same uneven rhythm it had when I was a child. But I had changed for years. That house had been the one place I never had to prove I belonged. Then my parents tried to turn it into a dollar amount, a legal argument, an exit plan for debts they had created. Now it was quiet again. Daniel sent the final legal notices that afternoon. Mom and Dad were required to communicate through him. They received nothing from the estate, and they were responsible for the extra legal costs caused by the shortened recording and the claims they continued after the full evidence was available. Dad could no longer count on selling Grandpa's home to rescue another failed business. Mom could no longer tell relatives she had been unfairly cut off without someone asking why Grandpa had already given them nearly $1 million. Their version of the story had not just failed. It was part of the public record now. Mom waited outside the courthouse before I left. Her makeup had worn away beneath her eyes. Dad stood several feet behind her, staring at his phone as if the screen could offer him another way out. "I'm still your mother," she said. I looked at her for a long moment. "You gave birth to me," I said. "Rose raised me. Charles protected me." Her mouth tightened. "I made mistakes. A mistake happens once. You made the same choice for 35 years. She reached for my wrist, but I stepped back. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I'm not paying for a relationship you never built." That was the last conversation we had without lawyers between us. A few weeks later, Dad sent a message saying his business was collapsing. I did not send money. I gave Daniel permission to forward information about debt counseling and community assistance. Help was available. Rescue was not. I kept the house. I kept working. And I used part of the inheritance to create a small education fund for children being raised by grandparents, aunts, uncles, or anyone else who chose to stay when parents did not. On the first morning, the fund opened. Maria joined me in Grandma's garden. We planted a fresh row of tulips along the fence. The soil was cool beneath my fingers. Somewhere inside, the coffee maker clicked off. That evening, I hung Grandpa's brass key on its old hook beside his hat. The chair across from me at the kitchen table was still empty. For once, I did not look toward the door. I used to think Grandpa left me a house. He didn't. He left me the right to stop standing beside empty chairs, the right to stop translating silence into excuses, the right to stop mistaking guilt for love. My parents believed $4 million was the ending. It wasn't. Months later, Mom sent a letter asking whether I was ready to put family first. I read it at Grandpa's kitchen table. Then I placed it beneath the brass key, struck a match, and watched the paper curl inside the fireplace. Not out of rage, out of clarity. The door stayed locked to people who remembered me only when money was on the other side, but it opened for children who needed the education fund, for Maria, and for friends who showed up without asking what they would receive. Grandpa had not left me everything. He left me proof that I could choose who came home. If you have ever stopped begging for a place in your own family, share your story below and subscribe so you are here when the next truth finally comes out.